everyone, to a new episode of All Things NBA from A to Z. I'm Chris Persianen here with Zach Noble, and we are very, very, very proud today to welcome a special guest to the show. Now, when you talk Toronto Raptors, you got to have Michael Grange give his insight, give his takes, talk about what he's noticed, and that's who we've got here with us today. Want to thank Michael Grange from Sportsnet, covers the Raptors, covers the NBA, you name it, for joining us. First of all, how was your off season? How are you doing? Thanks for coming on the show.
No, I appreciate it. I had a really good off season. It was a little hectic, right? I mean, the Raptors were sort of front and center with a lot of stuff. Felt like right from the trade deadline, right through to the draft, and then, kind of free agency after that. But things finally started winding down kind of mid July, and I kind of I just wound down right along with it. So we got a little busy in August with Canada basketball and the World Cup, but yeah, now we're kind of back at full speed and ready to roll.
So that probably kept you the busiest, Canadian basketball, right? Or was the off season more riveting than from your side of things? And it seemed like, as an outsider, just really picking up Grady Dick and arguing back and forth if guys should be traded or.
Yeah, I mean, that got a little intense. Like I think what the Raptors were going to do, and then what was going to happen with Siakam if they were going to do something, and that kind of was really pretty hot and heavy there for a while. So, but it just sort of kind of reached a point, and I think literally executives around the league just said, "Look, there's nothing we're going to do here. So why don't we just, everyone just agreed to put their phones down for a little bit." And well, everyone, I guess, except Milwaukee and Portland. But anyway, and so that kind of just chilled out, and then the Canada basketball stuff was just fine. Like it's been a long time coming for them to have the kind of success they had this summer, and it's people who love basketball up here, and there's a lot of them. Really, it's in a way, it's almost like their passion project. So for Canada to do well and kind of really have an exciting tournament was, you were working, but it was fun to do for sure.
Awesome. Awesome.
Were you there?
I wasn't able to go. I did it in the studio here in Toronto. So I was getting up for I think 1:30 in the morning to be on studio at like 3 in the morning and stuff. So it was felt like I was there somehow, but
yeah, close enough.
Yeah, but it was good. It was a great experience.
I love when wins mean that much to the fan base receiving them. I was just covering the New York Jets' first victory in franchise history over the Philadelphia Eagles, and you could tell that was the most exciting win for that crowd since 2015 in the Meadowlands. Like, it really meant something, So anyway, back up north, the definitely move of note this offseason for the Raptors was, intentional or not, Van Vleet out, Schroeder in. Personally, on the court, I've always liked Dennis Schroeder. I've always marked him as someone that Tom Thibodeau would love to have on his team, driving, pressuring the rim. I remember a couple seasons ago, he was like top 5 in the league in drives per game, just a machine at generating those kind of looks. But he slots into a lineup that features Scottie Barnes and Jakob Poeltl, and OG Anunoby can definitely shoot from the corner. But even, Siakam not marked as a sniper, just reliable. What did you think about that move? Was that something they had their eye on? Was that a really good band-aid for a problem that arose? What just, your take on that move, how they handled Van Vleet's departure and replacement?
Yeah, I mean, it was like I said, it was pretty intense, and Fred Van Vleet is a great guy. I was really one of those people you really felt lucky to cover, and a great player and a great story. And, I think I'd come to mean a lot to the franchise, to the fan base. But I think that there was a upper limit on what the franchise wanted to spend on him. And, I think it was around, they might have gone to 100 million guaranteed over 3 years. And in the end, he decided to go with what I think he had 86 guaranteed over 2. with an option, for the third year in Houston. And I think that caught them off guard a little bit. But, I think that they were, you're always prepared for eventualities. And I think their interest in Schroeder goes back multiple years. I think it's somebody they've always liked for the reasons you talk about. I mean, he's just a really, really good, as good a player as Van Vleet is, he's not the on-ball defender that Schroeder is. And, he's not he just can't collapse defenses the way Schroeder can with his speed. And we certainly saw that at the World Cup for Germany. And so I think, an interesting way to look at the decision or to the extent it was a decision to the circumstances that led Van Vleet to leave, is by having what you would have been spending on him, walk down head out the door to Houston. All of a sudden you could kind of replenish a little bit. And it's not only just that they were able to use their full mid-level to get Schroeder, they were able to use their biannual exception and get McDaniels. And, and one criticism of this team, I'd say the last 2 years, it just hasn't been deep enough. And they really have a fall off over their, top 5-6 guys in the rotation. And, it was always a chicken egg thing, were the options not good enough, or would Nick Nurse just so addicted to his starters he wouldn't play them? I'm sure you've seen something like that in New York with Thibodeau. But, I think the bright side, if there is one, of losing a player as good as Fred Van Vleet is, I do think you get a very good player in Schroeder, but you're able also to add a depth piece in McDaniels. And so, if you kind of looked at that and, well, why didn't you trade Van Vleet when you had, if you thought you were going to lose him? Well, if you traded him at the trade deadline for Dennis Schroeder and McDaniels, well, that'd be a pretty decent trade. I think a lot of people go, yeah, if you're going to lose him anyway, that's not bad. So that's kind of a way to look at it.
I love the way you explained the value of Dennis there, and just the difference between Fred and, I don't know. I mean, you're probably right on Dennis. I mean, I'd have to go back and nitpick some tape when it comes to on-ball defense a little bit. I've probably overvalued Fred throughout the years in regards to that. But I think he's more of a system defender. Maybe it's more Nick Nurse than him over the years. So it'll be interesting to see how that defense carries over into Houston. I think the success overseas for Dennis, I mean, it's hard to say that's going to propel him late in his career, but I want to hope it does. And getting an opportunity to start again, I do think the discount they got on him, I think that's huge. It's not like Fred was a high usage guy by any means. So who do you think that's really going to impact, like from a usage standpoint, or who's going to take on a bigger role for, I mean, Fred wasn't a high usage guy. He was 24%, which is about a third level guy usually. But who do you think that impacts the most? Is it Scottie? More Gary Trent Jr. maybe? Probably not. But
yeah, I think I mean, if it unfolds the way they all want it to, it's going to be Scottie. And an interesting note as it relates to Dennis is one of the reasons he came and is he had a couple of good years in Oklahoma City when Darko Rajakovic was the assistant there, and they had a really good bond. And so I think there's a comfort level there. That's one of the reasons he did come to Toronto. But and Darko's, he's really trying to get into sell, I guess, this notion that you're really going to have 4 interchangeable wings in terms of their ball handling responsibilities and their creative responsibilities, kind of with Jakob Poeltl for the most part as the hub. And but in saying that, I do think I don't think they just want to transfer Fred's uses, touches, shots right to Dennis and call it a day. I really do think that they want to see a lot more from Scottie Barnes. I think they want to put the ball in his hands a lot more. And, that's really what this franchise is going to hinge on. I mean, there's a lot of good players in this team, but, Scottie is the one who you can kind of project to be something really special. He didn't quite get there last year. It's a big ask what they're hoping him to be. But I think they really feel the need to kind of try and let him be that and put him in a position to be. And what they want is, what they need is him to be a star. And so I think this is going to be an important year for him. I think that there was, I just think that it wasn't a smooth fit with him, Siakam, and Fred Van Vleet. And so I think, I think they're going to pivot away from, I think the short answer is Scottie Barnes is going to be the guy who's going to soak up some more of those touches, some more of those responsibilities. I don't know if he's going to be a point guard on this team, as kind of as I think he would dream of, but he's certainly going to get a lot of opportunities to create with the ball.
Yeah, I love that you noted he was an assistant coach, Darko was in OKC, because that year of Dennis was like such an outlier. I mean, to me, but like he's been that guy. It's just I'm talking from like a usage standpoint. If I don't look at his numbers, I would never guess. I mean, after watching Dennis all these years, his usage got up to 27, 30% even in Atlanta for a year, but he was never like a winning player necessarily in Atlanta like he was in OKC that year. I mean, he was shooting 39% from three and just doing everything. And he was a perfect fit in almost any offense there. And if he can get back to that guy, that's a player that's almost as good as peak Fred Van Vleet. I think it's pretty close to that guy. That's arguably a hot take, but I really liked that Dennis that year, and I'll always remember that team. A big Chris Paul guy and whatnot. But before we move on, I definitely want to touch on Scottie here down the road. But off-season wise, were they close to getting anybody else in there? I mean, were they close on any trades whatsoever?
I mean, I think that they were really, really exploring the whole Siakam thing, and I think the decision there would have been to pivot a bit younger, add depth, add some picks. And so
Atlanta is the team that kept coming.
Atlanta, I think, was the team that was kind of, it was pretty clear that there was interest there in the deal. And my understanding is Toronto in the end kind of backed away from it. And you have heard Toronto have this version, that they do kind of get into these talks. They do kind of push it down the road a little bit. And then, when if they don't get exactly what they want, if they can't kind of win the deal, they sort of turn around and, it's a pattern, I think, that you do hear from other teams and elsewhere in the league that can be a little frustrating. But in the end, they're not there to make friends. They're there to win deals. I think that they were in for sure on Damian Lillard, kind of at the other end of the extreme. Like that was, okay, well, if we're going to not go younger, then, we might as well get better. And, they were prepared to go all in with all the pick equity. I think Grady Dick would have been in that deal, and they could have done, I think in the end, they probably could have done like 3 firsts, 2 swaps, and then some salary matching. What they didn't want to do, and it makes sense when you think about it, is throw in one of their core, probably OG Anunoby. He was the most likely so in other words, if you're going to add Dame Lillard, you're trying to win like tomorrow. And so, when they were trying to pull off a deal where they would have gone deep on the futures and, but hope to keep their core. And so it would have been OG, Pascal, Scottie, Schroeder, Dame, Hurdle, and plus whatever bench depth they had. And, that's where they went. And I think, you can see what Portland did in the end. And I think they probably ended up kind of got a little bit better deal out of it. But those were the 2 moves. I think that there was definitely, something could happen, but just didn't.
Yeah, I talked early in the offseason about, when the mention of a mystery team for Lillard started, I said it should be Toronto, right? Because you talk about their talks with the Knicks about Anunoby and other teams and what they were looking for him, what they were looking for from Atlanta for Siakam, the value that they place on these guys that we know have really strong complementary skill sets should therefore match up with wanting to go get, an offensive dynamo number 1. We've seen that move work really well for them in the past. So I just like you said, I don't think the opportunity was there where, DeRozan and Pirtle is a little different than Anunoby, Grady, name 2 other players.
I mean, that's the challenge, where, a lot of people are kind of watching this year with Toronto is I don't think they don't see themselves as kind of being stuck in the middle a little bit. I think they see themselves as having a lot of options. They can pivot a lot of different ways. But, when you look at, you're referring to that deal for Kawhi Leonard, it's easy to overlook the fact that, they were a 59-win team heading into that summer. And they had all their picks. They had, like I always tell people, like Norm Powell was the 11th man on that team. Like it was just as deep a team as
so good. Yeah, that was
Zak and Kris was coming
unreal.
off the bench. Fred Van Vleet was coming off the bench. Like it was just an extraordinarily deep team. And so as a result, they could put together, they could trade an all-NBA player in DeMar DeRozan, and they could trade a good up-and-coming young player in Jakob Poeltl, and they could add a pick and still have enough halfway through the season to put together a deal for Marc Gasol. And like they were trading Jakob Poeltl, they still had Serge Ibaka and Jonas Valanciunas. So, and that's, so that's why they were able to make that trade. And you look at any of the big, huge trades that have happened in the years since, they always would have been in a position to win any of those deals because of just what I said. The stage they're at now, they don't have that depth in my mind. So they, like I said, they would have had to go heavy on futures to pull a deal for Dame Lillard, or, maybe they got to trade part of their core to add multiple pieces to kind of build up their depth. So I just sort of see them in I do see them in a bit of a holding pattern because they don't have, when you look down their bench, you talk to NBA talent people, they just haven't had a great run the last 4 years of kind of finding players out of nowhere, which they seem to do at ease for about 3 or 4 years. They could do it in their sleep, it seemed, and just Christian Koloko right now, who they kind of were pretty excited about as a second-round pick. His career's up in the air right now. He's got he's been out with a respiratory problem. And, that's just another year where they haven't been able to kind of find a player. And I think in this NBA, especially, the teams that end up kind of making a move are the ones, that are able to really find good quality players lower in the draft, second round, and and it bolsters the whole program. So that's where the Raptors aren't right now. And so we'll see, what this direction they end up going in. But to this moment, like, people still aren't really clear.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. I mean, I've had lots of questions with Masai, the direction. I don't want him to come out and say this is the plan and this is what we're doing. I do think the moves that have been made, which is all you can evaluate a team by, some of them conflict in perceived intention, I think is the right way to say that. So yeah, these are questions I've had. I want to talk to you now about a little different aspect here. Between whether it's media day, whether it's the preseason, the vibe you're picking up from this team. Is this a team out for vengeance? Is this a team that feels that they're underrated and have a chip on their shoulder? Is this a team that is united as a locker room? What are you?
Yeah, it's a really good question.
What are you feeling?
I think it's kind of an interesting vibe because, if you go back not last season, the season before, and they were a 47-win team after they had that year in Tampa. They got in the lottery, they got Scottie Barnes, and then they really surprised a lot of people and they won 48 games, I think. And people thought the old Raptors magic was, it just skipped a year and everything was fine. And so I think that's what hurt them last year. His expectations were so high and probably unreasonably so in retrospect. And, that just sort of had a cascading effect. And when you add that with, players looking for extensions or heading to free agency, it just created a very tense environment. I don't think Nick Nurse handled the losing very well. I think he got frustrated with it. I think he started looking elsewhere as to where his, I don't think he was believing in the direction everything was going. And I just think it was a very unpleasant year for everybody involved. And so, this year, it's a very much a wait and see. I think when they hired Darko, pretty much an unknown, like he was not one of these guys who was, really prominent in all the rumor mills. I think he had I think within the business, people knew him, respected him. But I don't think he was, he was going to be the next assistant to get a job. So, you come and they not only did they kind of move off 13 assistant, a head coach and 13 assistants. Like I still don't know the name of everybody. Everybody that's come in now, the completely new staff, new team security person, new head trainer, new people in the team physiotherapy group. It's just a lot of change. And
Cleaned house.
Pardon me?
Cleaned house, the therapist.
Yeah. I mean, there's still like it was there's a lot of change. And I think coming off last year, people were a little, nobody's made any proclamations yet. But I think what's happened is I think Darko's done a really good job. I think he's kind of, people are increasingly, as things have gone along, it's gone from we'll see to pretty good to like, he's gained some allies, I think, in his locker room because he's run a really good camp. I think he's a very genuine people person, which is, not to say anything about Nick. I think he puts a higher priority on that kind of relationship building. And I think it's been here in the past. Everyone's new. There's no hierarchy anymore. Like everybody's starting with a clean slate. And so I think as camp's gone along, and they've done fine in the exhibition season for what that's worth, it's kind of tension sort of dissipated, and like at media day, it was all, it was a pretty awkward situation where you had Masai kind of calling the team and indirectly, not so indirectly, Pascal's selfish, and Siakam having to push back against that, and on and on. And that seems like 3 months ago now. And Siakam's had a great training camp. He's looked great. He's played well alongside Scottie. Scottie's played fantastic. Again, caveat, it's just exhibition play, and so you're kind of, I think they're in a good situation where the expectations are pretty low. Like nobody's, looking at them to win 48 games or compete for a top home seed or whatever it might be. But when you kind of stand back objectively, you go, it's not a bad team. It's not all that much worse than the team that did win 48 games. I could argue it's maybe a little better than the team that won 41. And so, and maybe this change in coach, change in approach is enough to kind of just let everyone kind of exhale a bit. So there's been no, like, we're going to kick everyone's ass, we're going to show people, there's been none of that, but it's been, it's, people seem to be enjoying going to work. And, I think that's a start.
Love it. No, it's a cool background to get from you. What about how you've been seeing them on the court in these first preseason games, 3-0? Like, how do you, Michael, view this team from what you've actually seen on the court, and what you expect from that? I mean, whether it's rotations or just who's improving.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that jumps out, Darko came here and says, look, we're going to pass the ball, we're going to move the ball, 0.5, offense, all that kind of stuff, which really isn't all that radical. Like, I mean, it's like, the contrast is I think last year what Nick sort of continued leaning on was, I'm just going to go with our strengths, and the result was an offense that kind of it kind of ended up being a lot more isolation heavy than you might want to see, and it wasn't always the prettiest to watch. But the upside was they never turned it over. They won the possessions. They got their offensive rebounds. They had a very distinct style that they played well. And really, in the end, what hurt them was, they just didn't shoot the ball well enough. I think, so Darko's come in and he's really emphasized, a different style of play. And I think in 3 games, they've had at least 30 assists in all 3 games. I think the defensive disruptiveness remains. Like, they're still really high with deflections and steals, just because in part because of their personnel. Like they have guys who are good at that. And and I think as the ball moves, the field goal percentages are pretty good. So again, there's not much, you can't get too carried away with 3 exhibition games. One of them was against an AVL team that was pretty shorthanded in Karen's Tapins or whatever they were. And so you can't read too much into it. But if the goal is to play a different style, there is a different style that's evident. So that's positive. I think in terms of rotation, Gary Trent Jr. is very much looks like he's going to be coming off the bench. He started basically 85% of his games as a Raptor. That's good, I think. I mean, that's always seemed like the most obvious role for him. And he had a great game coming out of the bench against Chicago. And it looks like, so Dennis Schroeder is going to start. And it looks like there's going to be a commitment to playing like a 10-man rotation, like having a true second unit. And that's something that, was a really, I know one of the sticking points between Nurse and management in the last couple of years is Nurse leaned really heavy on his starters. It worked to an extent because they were able to be competitive, but long term, you just had guys who weren't developing. Like Malachi Flynn as an example. Like he's year 4, you still don't know if he can play or not. Precious Achua is a guy who's kind of he's got so much potential, but his role would fluctuate, significantly based on different factors. And when you're playing starters 40, 41 minutes, it's hard to find time for other guys. So it looks like there's going to be a real emphasis on dialing back the minutes for the starters, really committing to kind of a structured second unit. And as I said, Gary Trent Jr. being kind of the focal point, at least scoring wise, out of that second unit. And then I think the other thing they really are emphasizing is they want to run a lot of offense through the post, a lot of cutting. They're still not a great shooting team, but I think they feel like if they can get the ball into the post and cut off that, they can create some offense that way and really improve their half-court offense, which was arguably their weakest element last year.
Off-ball movement is how to supplement, a lack of shooting. That's all you got, right? Is being mobile and creative and effective with those movements. I'm going to use Scottie Barnes as the soapbox here, but I do think this question applies to even a McDaniels or a Flynn or other members of the rotation, talking about, the upside, the potential, but also the right now. And again, like I said, I'll just go with Barnes to start. There's a lot of talk about what he can be going forward. Of course, always the Raptors fans love him. What constitutes success for him this season? What constitutes success for the young players, for even players in the rotation that are getting a little older, like you said, like a Flynn, a year 4. He's not exactly a rookie. What constitutes success for these guys? What kind of roles, if they filled them well, would be in line with the expectations of both the coaching staff and the front office?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think with Scottie Barnes, like he needs to take a step. And I think he was, and he's been a 15-point scorer last couple of years. When he was a rookie, it was great. When his second year wasn't so good, And but again, he's, it looks like, like physically he's added some size, and not that he needed it, but he's a beast right now. He's given some Julius Randle vibes. Like he is a heavy load to handle when he puts the ball on the floor and gets his shoulders going to the rim. He's a really good passer, and he's a really good player, in that painted area, especially, out of a post up. And so it looks like he's shooting the ball a little better. And so if he can kind of, be a passable threat, as, in the moments when he doesn't have the ball and it's maybe running through Siakam or whatever, and then, otherwise can just use his God-given ability to break people down, and then his ability to find teammates. Like he can really affect a game. And I think he's got to bring it on the defensive end. He's one of those guys who's kind of a playmaker defensively, like he'll do some stuff and he'll walk away from the game and go, wow, like, because he's generated a couple of steals and a great block and whatever. But he's got lost in 3 rotations and got beat off the dribble. So that's got to improve. But he's got to become, I think Siakam's going to be the leading scorer on this team just because he's that skilled still. But I think Scottie Barnes should be the second leading scorer. I think it should be at or more than 20 points a game. I think he's got to do it at a good efficiency. He's got to get to the line in a big way. Like he's got to be a guy who just punishes teams because he's physically very suited to do it. So I think that's really, if he does, like if he becomes a guy who's people, maybe he's an all-star, if he kind of starts generating those kind of conversations November, December, I predict the Raptors will have a pretty good season because, he's that important to them. I think, you look at, I think Jakob Poeltl, you can know what he's going to do. I think he's a very reliable, really good pro. OG Anunoby, is there a little bit more in his game? I mean, you'd almost hope not to in a way, because what he does when he keeps it simple is great, but I think he's got to be a really good shooter for them. And then they probably need to, but I think this team will still require Pascal Siakam to be their leading scorer, their top assist guy. And, the hope is that, they've changed the way that a lot of their actions are, whereas rather than starting with him early in the clock and, he kind of has nowhere to go and ends up, he's kind of holding it longer than anyone would like. They're kind of running a lot of stuff where he ends up with it at the end of the action. And so all of a sudden the defense is scrambling to him, and, other players have touched it. Maybe he's got an advantage, maybe he's got a switch, and, and he's still a guy who, I say still, like he's only 29, but, you kind of forget that he was a 25-7 and 6 guy or something last year, and he's a 6'9" guy who can put it on the floor and score with either hand, and he's I think he's capable of really helping a team or lifting this team, and the wild card will be how well he can shoot it.
Was it 53 he had against New York at Madison Square Garden?
That was an amazing game.
I covered that game, and it was a fully skill propelled breakdown of the opposing defense.
Yeah. Thibodeau wouldn't double him, right?
It was, yeah. Well, Thibodeau will double Antetokounmpo in the paint. He will double Embiid in the paint. He will let Joe Ingles on the Bucks, or he'll let Daniel House on the Sixers beat him. That's his thing, right? But Toronto that night, it was
that was Siakam kind of at his peak, and he kind of, I think he wore out a little bit as the year went on, and
yeah,
there's some other stuff going on, but like I said, I think the way they want to play, if they buy in under Rajakovic, I think will help him. And as I said, they just gotta shoot a little bit better from deep, and I think it could change the complexion for them.
Grady Dick is the cure, baby. I'm a Kansas alum, so
I like the kid. I see his potential.
How many minutes do you think he's
a rookie? He's a rookie. The game is moving a little fast for him.
16.
And I think he's more of like a cavalry guy, like he might hit the wall, and then, maybe February or March, you're like, oh, okay, he's figured it out. And he could be a factor by then.
16 minutes a game. Does that
under
sound...
16 minutes a game by year's end? Average.
Oh, he'll average 16. I think he'll get 16.
Okay, I'll take that. I like that. Speaking of like Siakam's peak you brought up, and I think I'm arguably the biggest Siakam guy there's been outside of Toronto, let's say, and I get a lot of crap for it actually, but I personally, as much as I'd love to dream about another dimension to his game, I feel like we've seen his peak, and that's a top 20, top 25 player at best. Maybe if everything broke right, you put the pieces around him, he could be a top 15 guy. You look on this roster and you try to figure out where is the upside, the potential. It's obviously glaring at you with Scottie Barnes, and that's the dream and hope being where they drafted him. Other than that, I agree. OG is probably, he fits perfectly seamlessly on any team in the NBA, and that's why he's a dream for any team, where you can get a lot back for him. And Gary Trent's a very valuable player, but the whole fit with Siakam and Scottie Barnes is my biggest question for this team, and it's been the last 2 years. And so I'm not sold on that. I think this team, if everybody reached their potential right now, it could be a really competitive first round, even a second round team if everybody clicked and came together. But like Scottie Barnes, like I'm definitely on the lower end of the Scottie Barnes hype train, just because I don't think he improved a ton from year 1 to year 2. But
that's a fair criticism, 100%.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I think he has it in him. I think he has the physical tools to grow, and it won't shock me. But my projection on him is just like right now a top 30 guy at best, getting there. But for me, that fit with Siakam could hold him back quite a bit. And until that's resolved, or maybe it will shock me this year and it will work, because Siakam's a great passer. I just think in order for him to score and get to his spots, it's not in a Scottie Barnes type of system where he can. Scottie Barnes' true value would show in that same system as well.
This reminds
Yeah,
me
I
of the
think
Knicks with Randall and Barrett. You know, will Barrett
That's
play
a
his
decent comparison.
will Barrett
no,
play his
there
best
there are
basketball with Randall on the court? But Randall is so much better that you have to have, you know.
no, there's definitely some parallels. I think the real issue is those guys could coexist better if there was one more. And this is going to be an interesting decision that they made with Schroeder versus Gary Trent Jr. You know, one of the reasons they played Gary Trent Jr. as a starter for the most part last year was it gave them a little more floor spacing with him and Van Vleet, and then at least you had a couple of legit 3-point options where you had at the end of the year you had Pirtle, Barnes, and Siakam all kind of competing in that for that same oxygen. And so right now you've gone to Schroeder. There's another, there's another guy that doesn't shoot it real great, and like it's very easy to imagine teams just zoning the hell out of these guys and playing under everything and just compacting the paint to the point where neither Scottie nor Pascal or Jakob Pertl have anywhere to operate. And when you talk about their upside potential, I mean that's certainly where they would kind of, I think, run into a lot of problems as a playoff team. Is I think regular season wise, you can probably survive, but you get into a playoff series and you're scouted and game plans roll out and you're stifled. And there was a reason, like Nick Nurse isn't an idiot. Like there was a reason he played the way he played, and it was a very deliberate, very specific style. They executed it, and that style was we don't have enough. We don't put enough pressure on the rim with the ball. We don't spread the floor enough without the ball. And so absent those two things, your half-court offense is going to be a real problem. And it was 2 years ago, and they managed to get by. It was this year. Last year they didn't get by as well. So what they did was, we're going to take more shots than you. And so they never turned it over. And so, offensively, they were a little standstill at times, but if you're not passing, you're not turning it over. They would go get it off the rim. So they would get their own misses. They led the team. I think they were first or second in the league in offensive rebounds. That would get them their extra shots, and then they would turn you over like crazy. And and that resulted in a statistically significant advantage in terms of shots taken. So much so that it should have translated into more wins, but it just didn't. I think because at the defensive end, there's just so many breakdowns when they were trying to run shoot those gaps, etc. That if you got past that first layer of defense, it was a layup line. So there's probably a happy medium in there for defensively, and I think they're really banking on if they kind of move away from a more standstill approach offensively, that it can unlock some things. I mentioned the 30+ assists again, exhibition play, but also their turnover numbers are way up. Guess what? You move the ball more, you pass the ball more, your body's moving all over the place. You make more mistakes. And so that's going to be a really fascinating thing to watch is the calculus that, Nick Nurse and his staff arrived at the last couple of years as to the best way this personnel group could win, versus, is there another way to do it? And maybe it'll unlock some things, but at what cost? And so I think, it could all end up to being the exact same place they were a year ago. The NBA market is pretty ruthless, right? Like if you're a 41 team, you end up winning about 41 games. So we'll see if they can squeeze something out, but that's what happens when the ball goes up.
I hear you. I mean, that makes me think right away, can't play the games on paper. They're going to be played, but that ball will go up at some point, right? But the lens through which you look at a season, especially from before it starts, can really determine what kind of season you have as it goes on. is this front office and is this coaching staff in kind of the brain trust of the team? Are they kind of in a position where it's like, we're just going to try to be the best team we can be, win as many games as we can with this squad? Is there some sense of urgency for an in-season upgrade? Is there some sense of they'll move off of Anunoby if things don't start so hot? If a team like New York calls offering a Barrett or even, like a Fournier and Quickly type of deal. I know New York was interested last season, offering an unprotected first and 2 protected firsts, and then the Fournier deal was what I had reported last season. Because that's what I had heard. Where do you see them? Are they in like that kind of that crawl mode?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't see them going out. Well, clearly, I mean, with as it relates to Dame Lillard, they were willing. Just look at their summer. On one level, they were willing to get off their best player, and kind of trade him for depth and draft picks and futures type thing. And on the other hand, they were willing to trade all their futures for one of the best players in the league. So, like I said, I would say that they see themselves as flexible. I think the most obvious parachute, or ejection, they can hit the ejection button, right? Like if things really go screwy and people are getting hurt and all of a sudden they're 10-20 and the rookie coach is under a ton of pressure, they can, I'm sure that there's Siakam deals they can rekindle very easily. I mean, OG Anunoby, the reason that Siakam is mentioned all the time is because if they wanted to sign him to an extension, they would have signed him to an extension. They don't want to pay him 4 years, $200 million. That's about as simple as I could put it. Two things are going to happen there. One is he's going to somehow go, you know what, I'm willing to sign for less than that. Or two, they're going to trade him. And, and we'll see which direction that goes in. The one with Anunoby is very interesting because, I think the max they can offer him on an extension is about $16 or $18 million, something like that. It's not enough. He's probably a guy who's going to be in that $35 million range. Probably. So if you're talking 4 years, 160, 4 years, 150 on the open market, they can't pay him that. So not on an extension anyway. And so if you're tumbling and, you're a guy like him is heading to free agency, well, you're going to trade him too. And so I think that's the other side of this is the Peaches and Cream version. As the new coach comes in, everyone buys in. You got a full season of Jakob Poeltl, everyone stays healthy. Scottie Barnes takes a leap. Gary Trent Jr., who's also a pending free agent, by the way. He has a great year, 6-man as the year candidate off the bench. Dennis Schroeder, is getting to the paint at will. Like, okay, are they a 44 or 45 win team? Is that a 5th or 6th seed in the East? Probably. But the other side of that equation is completely in play. And things, the Raptors could be just where they were this time a year ago or last, at the trade deadline last year where, half their teams in the market.
Love it. No, they're definitely the stereotypical high-end kind of middling team because they do have the high-end outcome if Scottie Barnes turns out to be like the 3rd pick that he truly was and that they drafted him for. So I mean that's always a scenario that can happen in my estimation. But is Masai on the hot seat?
No, he's not. I mean, it was interesting. I mean, this is the first year in the market where he had to face some tough questions. I don't think people people have a lot of questions. And I think it really comes from like whatever direction he were to choose, people would he'd be fine. Okay. But the fact that there hasn't been an obvious choice has people, kind of confused. And so that's sort of where things are. Like people are, I would say he's among the fan base, he's not as untouchable maybe as he was even just a couple of years ago. But there's no possibility where he's managing for his job or he's under pressure from ownership or anything like that. He's got 2 years left on his deal. I think this time next year things could get interesting just in a bigger picture way as the there's a lot of corporate things going on, but I think whatever decision he makes is going to be based on, what he thinks is the best way to move this operation forward.
Yeah, gotcha. I'm gonna put you on the spot before we get you out of here. I don't know your level of comfortability with putting a number on it, but you had mentioned earlier you thought they were a little better than the 41 win squad, maybe not as good as the 48 or maybe just as good as the 40. If you were given a
43.
Okay. All right. I was gonna say
43.
you
I
get
think
a
that's pretty
$100
safe.
chip. You got
Yeah,
to
I
put
mean,
it on a
I
number.
think what the over under in Vegas is 36. I feel that feels really low. This team, I mean, Jakob, they were really good. Well, they were pretty good once they added Jakob Poeltl at trade deadline. I think they went 15-9 when he started. They're a little deeper this year. I think they should be a little seamless. I just don't think they're going to have to deal with as much outside noise as they did last year. So I think as long as they're relatively healthy, of course, I think 43, 44 is a reasonable number. And as we said, I mean, if you look at the East, you can kind of see who's going to be first and second. I like Cleveland, actually. So I think the top three are fairly obvious.
Love it.
But after that, I mean, could be Knicks Raptors in April for that fourth spot.
I won't spoil my take on the standings because we have an episode where we're going to reveal ours coming up, but we're on track with our top three. So I agree with you there.
Over on the Raptors for sure. I agree. Over.
Yep.
Easy.
I like it. I think last year people got burned by them. I think this year they are willing to act based off of that. I do think the chance that they are a 43 or 42 win pace team and still decide to blow it up exists, making that number a little risky. But I totally get it. And I like the pick of the over from you, Michael. I also just want to thank you for joining us. Thank you for spending the time with us tonight here on All Things NBA. Your insight was incredible. Everything from the Lillard deal to the Van Vleet negotiations to, the uphauling, the reupholstering of the staff. The ins and outs of the teams. It's the team. It's why we had to have you on. Thank you so much for your perspective, your analysis, all of the above.
Thanks, guys. Have a great season, and I'm sure we'll see you down the road.
Absolutely. Much appreciated, my man.
Okay.
Enjoy the year.
Yeah, you too. Take care. Bye.
Listeners at home, 5 stars, review, rate, subscribe. You know the deal. Thanks for tuning in. Have a good one, everyone.